We had a small amount of discussion last week, Tim and Ron and I, about how to best design parts for 3D printing to create something or build something. And so I wanted to just real quick walk through the process that I used. Maybe people would find that helpful. So how do you take an 8 millimeter shaft and end up with a part, like this here or these here that connect the two in such a way that when you print it, it actually works. So the first thing I do, and the whole process here is going to be that I actually create the parts that I want in my 3D modeling software so I can connect them together with another part. So my aluminum profile and my shaft and my bearings, all those kinds of things, I would take my caliper and measure it and say, okay, my profile here is 25 millimeters, if I can get that on there right. It's 25 millimeters square, and my shaft is 8 millimeters, and my bearing is 15 millimeters. I would take those measurements and write them down somewhere, sketch them down if I had to, but then I would bring that over into my Fusion 360 modeling software and start to build it from there. I'll go through some of what I think are key things to know while I'm going through how to make this part. So you start with a component, and you can build inside this component. And what I'm going to do is right click on this and eventually here get new component. So that will keep all of my settings and build and everything separate from the main component. It makes it easier to change a few things later on rather than everything. So if you click on it once, it selects it. If you click on it again, it selects it so you can change the name. So I'm just going to call this shaft 8 millimeter. All right. So that's going to be part of but separate from the main component. So to create a part, you can click on sketch. You start every part by clicking on sketch. And you've got different options. You can draw a line or different types of rectangles, different types of circles. You can play with those. I'm just going to start with some simple things. So I'm going to create a circle, and I'm going to create a center diameter circle. I could do a 2-point where it draws a circle between 2 points. You can figure it out. Okay, but center diameter circle, and then it wants me to know where to start drawing. So something that took me a while to figure out here are planes. It says select a plane or a planar face. So it's basically saying, where do I want to start drawing if I have a three-dimensional image? If I click on my little, I don't know what this thing's called here, but you can click on it, drag your image around to show different perspectives of it. Or you could also scroll click on your mouse or trackball, and you can do the same thing. So it's asking me, where do I want to start drawing? What plane, what surface do I want to draw on? If I had a cube here, what side would I want to draw on? So if I click top, I'm going to be looking top down on my part. If I started here on this one, I'd be looking at the side or the front of the part. But I'm going to start drawing the shaft from the top. So if I click on the top here, it'll center everything for me. And when that turns from blue to yellow, I've selected that plane. I click it, and now this is the center of my drawing area. So I'm going to click release to set my center point, and then it says specify diameter of circle. So I can drag my mouse out, or not drag, I'm just moving it because I released the mouse. But it also shows me the value of that, and when it's blue like that, when it's highlighted, I can just type a value and hit enter again, and now I have an 8 millimeter circle. I can use my scroll wheel to scroll in here. That's the easiest way, and click the scroll wheel to drag it around. So I've got a sketch. If I come over here to my part name here and expand this, I've got sketches here, and it shows me all of my sketches, and this is a sketch that I drew. I can click the little light bulb to make it disappear, which is handy later on, but that's my sketch. I want to create an actual part out of this. I want to create a shaft, so I'm going to click on create, and extrude is the default. Like I hit the letter E, it always gives you your shortcuts there. I'm just going to click create and click release on that part, and it gives me an arrow here where I can click and drag that, and I can go in the negative direction or positive direction, doesn't matter. it's blue, the text is blue, so I can type a value in there as well. I have different options over here, you know, whether I can have a one-sided or two-sided or symmetrical. Symmetrical, it'll create a part on both sides. You can play with that, but you know, there's my part. There's my 8mm rod. It's 25 millimeters long, so I've created that part. That's critical for making the pieces that I want to join this part to something else. So my bearing that I measured was 25 or 16 millimeters. So I'm going to come up here and click on my main part here and select new component. So now I'm going to select that and call that bearing. So now I've got a new different part, and it still shows my other parts. This little activate component here allows you to determine which component you are working on at the time. So you see how my shaft is no longer activated. If I click that, my shaft changes color and shows me that it's the one I'm working on. But I want to work on bearing. So I'm going to look straight down on the top. I'm going to go to Sketch and Circle. I'm going to do a center diameter circle again, and it's going to ask me select a plane or a planar face. So I've got two options here. I can pick this plane in my XYZ space, or I can pick the top of my part here. That's a planar face. It's a flat space, it's not curved, along a plane. It matches the same plane here. So I click that. Now it says place center point. I'm going to scroll in here, and you can see that I've got crosshairs in a square box, but if I hover that over, it's hard to see, hover that over the center of my circle there, it gives me a round circle instead of a square box. It's hard to see. But place center point, I'm going to click, and I'm going to drag out here, and I'm going to make that 16 millimeters. So now I have, let me scroll out, a circle based off the center of the part behind it, and it's just, I can select that, and it's just the expanded part of that, not the inner part. I could make it the inner part, you know, the shaft part, but I'm not. So click Create and Extrude, and I'm going to extrude this down, and this was 45 millimeters, but if I wanted to, I could also make this in the direction, I could make it two sides. Now I could extrude this way as well. So I'm going to make this 45 millimeters and hit enter. Oh, I forgot one key thing. No, I guess it doesn't matter in this case. Okay, so now I have my bearing, and I have my shaft behind it. I can select it, but I can't edit it. So here's my bearing. I want to move that bearing so that it is centered on this shaft. So I'm going to right click on it, pick Move Copy, and I have the option to select, you know, a face, a specific face of something, but I really want to move the whole thing. This is a body now because I have extruded my sketch into a body. So I'm going to select Body, and I'm going to center my view on it and click this arrow. Now I could rotate this body, I could do all kinds of things with it. I don't want to. I just want to slide it down so it's centered on the shaft a little bit more. Shaft's not big enough. So I'm going to click OK, and that moved more. So I'm going to go back to my shaft. I'm going to make that active. I'm going to click, scroll in here and click on the top of that. So just the top is selected, and Create. I'm going to drag that up so that it extrudes out of both sides of the bearing like that. Doesn't really matter how long this bearing is. And I'm going to join it to the previous part. If I said I wanted to cut, it would cut if there was, I'll go back to that in a minute. I could join the previous part, or I could make it a new body, and there's a line separating them, so now I've got two separate bodies here. I want to join this to the previous part. So now there's my 8mm shaft. It goes all the way through my bearing. If I select my bearing to make it active, there we go. So I've now created a shaft and a bearing that I can attach something to. So that's how I would build these parts, and then figure out how I wanted to attach them. It's a whole lot easier if the parts are right there on the screen and you can build from them, rather than trying to guess at what you're doing. All right, so now I've got my part. I want to put another part on there and join the two together. So I need to create my aluminum profile, which is part of my printer. So I made a new component. I'm going to call that profile, and now I'm going to draw that. So again, to draw a part, I want to pick Sketch. I'm going to pick a center rectangle this time. It's going to ask me about a plane or a planar face, so I'm going to just pick my plane to click on, and I'm just going to pick a spot that's centered along the part here, make it easier, and then specify size of rectangle. So I clicked, I moved my mouse, and I'm just going to type 25 and 25. That's the size of my profile. Hit enter, and now I have a sketch that is the size of the profile from the end. I want to create a body from that, so I click extrude, I select it, and I extrude that into a body. I'm going to say symmetric, so it extrudes from the bottom and the top from the same way, same motion. And I don't want to make this a new body. Oh yeah, this is a new body. I just created this. So click OK. There's my profile. So it's a representation of my profile. It's not very accurate, obviously. All right, so I've got my aluminum profile. I've got my shaft. How do I connect the two together? Well, this is the methodology that I used as I was creating this. And so for every part that I made, this was the method that I used, and it worked really well for me. So I'm going to create a 3-point rectangle. I'm going to use the top of my profile as my planar face to draw on. And you can see how this snaps into the corners, the cursor does. So there's my first corner, I click, there's my second corner, and how big or small you make this part is totally up to you. You can change it later. You can edit the part once you've created it, so I'm just going to make it as far out as my bearing there. So I click, there's my face there, or my sketch. I'm going to stop my sketch. I'm going to create that sketch into a body. So if I zoom in here, let me line this up. So there's my length of my extrusion here, or my extrude. So 23 millimeters minus 23 is the edge of that shaft. I'm going to decide that I want to go 10 millimeters into that. So I'm going to say 33 millimeters is how far I want to extend over that shaft end. That's probably plenty. So I can change it later if I want to. So I don't want to cut. It's determining because I went into a part that I'm going to cut. I don't want to cut. I want to make a new body right there. So that's my new body. I click OK, and it's separate from the shaft that's there. So, you know what okay. So if I make my shaft invisible, you can see there's actually no hole there. It just created a block. I want to actually make a hole for that shaft. So I'm going to zoom around to the top of my part here. Okay, I'm going to create a circle. I'm going to pick a 2-point circle. I'm going to pick the top of this profile here. And you can see as I move my cursor around, it's going to show me the edges of what's underneath it. So that's the edge of my bearing, that's the edge of my shaft. That's just fine. That's what I want to see. So I'm going to click on that, and it's going to draw this circle, and it's going to snap to that other piece behind it. Now it's 8 millimeters, which is the size of my shaft, so that's perfect. So all I have to do is type 8 millimeters, or I can just click on that once it snaps to the outline behind it. And I'll stop my sketch, and there is a sketch the same size as my 8 millimeter shaft. I'm going to create Maybe. Come here. There we go. And as I move back into this part, again, if I move this way, it would make a new part and join to this block, or I can move back into it and it automatically assumes I want to cut. So 23 millimeters was where that shaft started. That was the number I had. I'm going to make it 20 just to give myself a little buffer room there in case I need to fudge something a little bit. So you can see the edge of the shaft right there, and here's where my oh wait, no, I need to go all the way to it. What am I doing? So I need to go all the way through this, and I can drag this body all the way through, but it's going to, it's going to cut off part of my shaft if I do that, and if I decide later to change the size of this block, this 20 or 39 millimeter extension here, extrusion, is going to be the same. So I could later change the size of this block and this hole might not go all the way through it. So what I want to do is instead of distance, I want to pick to object. I want to pick the edge of this object, and so that extrusion always goes right to the edge of the object. Even if I move it later, it'll still follow that. So it's totally fine. That's what I want to do. Now again, it's going to, if I click OK right now, it's going to cut through that shaft as well. I don't want that, so I'm going to make my shaft invisible, and now when I click OK, it's only going to cut what is actually visible right now. I'll make my shaft visible again, and it fits all the way into that hole, but it didn't cut through it. So I learned that the hard way. So now I've got a hole that goes all the way through my block there. There we go. So now, did I want it to go all the way through the block? I actually didn't, because later on I'm going to have to put a hole right here that goes down into my extrusion. So I'm going to undo that. There we go. I'm going to click that. I'm going to create. I'm going to say 20 right there. And I'm going to make this, instead of one-sided, I'm going to make it two-sided. Oh, wait. One-sided. I want my extent to be to object. There we go. Let's go ahead and make my shaft invisible so I don't forget. And now I'm going to make it two-sided, and this side I'm going to make it go in, let's just say 15 millimeters. All right, it's going to be a cut. There we go. 15 millimeter hole. Only goes in as far, not quite as far as the shaft. So there we go. So now I need a hole through the top here. Okay. So let's see. So an easy way that I have found to create a point for a center hole is I'll go to Sketch and Rectangle. I'll make a 3-point rectangle. I'll use this face to draw on. And I'll click on this corner, and this piece is 25 millimeters wide, so 12.5 is the halfway point. I'll click that, and I went 15 millimeters, let's see, 15 this way. So just to keep things centered, I'm going to type 7.5 millimeters and hit enter. And that right there is my corner where I'm going to put my circle. So I can click, and there is my spot. I'm going to pick circle, center diameter. I'm going to snap right to that. And 6.75 has been the optimal size for me for printing holes through these blocks that my 1/4-20 screws can go through. So you'll see that it split it into two sections there because of the rectangle. Doesn't matter. Create extrude. I can click that, and it allows me to select more than one. So now you see over here it says 2 selected. 1, 2. I'm going to extrude that. Now, what I want to do is extrude it just like before. I want to pick to object, and I want to pick it to the back side of this, but I can't see it. Neat feature about this is if you hold down your left click, it will show you all the faces and features that are underneath wherever your mouse is, and you can see the colors change a little bit. So there's the face, the back side of the profile, and you can see, you know, things changing. I think right there is the back side of my block. There it is. So now it'll only go to the back side of that block and not cut into my profile. Click OK. Now I've got my whole all the way through. That's a functional part right there. You could call it done, or I could make it look prettier. I could add a chamfer to my edges here if I wanted to. A chamfer is just an angled edge. If you want to add something like that, you can. You can add that to multiple surfaces at the same time if you want to. So unselect that and click those edges. Oh, the chamfer won't let you do that. Well, let's try again. Modify, chamfer. There we go. So I can select all my edges that I want to chamfer. Chamfer maybe, depends on where you grew up, I guess. And I could change that as I want to. So chamfer is a good one. I personally prefer the fillet. A fillet is a curved surface, kind of a rounded surface. So I like that. That, to me, I have been liking that curved surface. It makes it look more like it's a mass-produced part rather than just something you cut out of a block. So you could add that fillet wherever you want to. If I wanted to add it to all of my edges here at the same time, I could. You'll see that there's a line in the back corner there. I can't actually see it, but it knows that I want to add it, so it's letting me do that. So I can add that to all my pieces. There you go. So that was the process that I used for joining things together, was simply to draw the two pieces that I wanted to join, and then I just put blocks and circles and whatever between them and cut away what I didn't want until I had the shape that I needed. I can go to Make, 3D Print, select the part that I want, and select OK, and give it a name, and it creates the STL, and you're done. Hope that helped.